Welcome to a presentation from the Nevada Department of Education. Thank you for joining us. With the onset of the coronavirus, teaching and learning in the traditional class has come to a halt. Today, schools across the nation and throughout the world have transitioned to remote learning. The Nevada Digital Learning Collaboration is glad to bring you the COVID-19 series of webinars, which will share valuable insights and tips for teaching and learning from afar. Today's topic is lesson planning with balance in mind, featuring Kim Loomis of I3 Digital PD. Welcome, I'm Kim Loomis. I've worked in the field of digital learning since 1999. I spent 10 years in the classroom as a high school mathematics teacher. Later, I held positions in school leadership and central office. I retired last summer as a director for online and blended learning in Nevada's Clark County School District. I provided leadership in the growth of digital learning in a K-12 setting, from teacher training, school admin consultation, secondary course development, software and systems contracting, to designing deployment models. I have over 20 years in the online and blended school setting, from teaching, designing, training, and administration, to managing systems and processes for growing classrooms of the future. Today, I head a consulting company, I3 Digital PD, which helps others across the nation grow high-quality digital learning programs. Our agenda for this webinar will begin by looking at remote learning while keeping balance in mind. Then we'll move into a discussion on lesson planning, where we'll talk about establishing an online presence, using digital content and tools. This webinar will share insights on how to engage students and wrap up with tips for successful deployment of remote teaching and learning. So, let's begin. As the former online and blended learning director, you know I'm a huge fan of digital learning. Even today, as I help others across the nation establish actively engaging learning environments so that students are empowered to take ownership of their learning. But never in my wildest dreams would have I expected a world quite like the one that we've been pushed into today. In these trying times, we must remember that all stakeholders, teachers, administrators, students, and parents alike, are all learning new pedagogies and skills. Please, please be patient with yourself and those around you. Also, it's important that we remember to focus on the core business of schools, relationships, and learning. Even with the addition of technology as a tool for learning, we should never take the heart of the classroom teacher out of the learning process. But today we're in a state of emergency. It's triage mode. The school year will not unfold as we planned it. All the curricular goals that we had planned, they're not going to be met. So the learning expectations must be managed accordingly. Ideally, designing effective distance learning programs requires planning and targeted professional development. However, in our current state, educators are caught in triage mode, and we're not in a position to craft an ideal learning environment, so we need to be flexible with ourselves, right? We want to keep and maintain that indispensable human touch of teaching and learning through this period of social distancing. The times are not ideal. We need to be flexible with ourselves and others around us. Teaching and learning should not be about the technology. Focus in on the core business of schools, that of relationships and learning. Our goal is to support the larger community by keeping students emotionally supported, stimulated, productively occupied, and focus on those essential standards for this time of year. When we think of balance and lesson planning, we need to think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. As you know, when we moved to remote learning in mid-March, one of the first things that our administrators in schools did was look at the psychological needs, maintaining that lunch at school, an opportunity for them to have the food that they need to feel safe. It is not a normal time, right? So we have to take these things and we have to think about where the students are emotionally. During times like this, there are disappointments abound. They miss their friends. They're missing the 3rd grade and 5th grade field trips. They're missing those promotion ceremonies. And how about graduation? Let alone some of those family outings like Cousin Katie's wedding. So as you start lesson planning, keep in mind these Maslow's hierarchy of needs. What we'll want to do is we'll want to think about letting kids know it's safe to try and fail. We just need to pick up and try again. We'll want to focus in on relationships with our students as well as peer-to-peer relationships. We'll want to build that esteem by praising, and I like to say praise often. The sweetest sound to anyone's ear is their own name. Use it often. And hopefully we can push students to problem solving and creativity and get to that high peak of self-actualization. But learning from home is not ideal. There are no bells, there's tons of distractions, limited resources, and family dynamics to have to worry about. When I say limited resources, some of our students, as you know, didn't have the devices that they needed, and I know our schools are working hard to get those out there. Some homes only have one device shared among 3 students. Or they don't have a library of books that parents can read to their son or daughter in the evening. When we think of family dynamics, we don't know the parent's status. We don't know if they're away at work or through social distancing and non-essential businesses being closed, have they been terminated? And some homes have multi-generations. Imagine a home with 3 kids, mom and dad and grandma, all living in a 3-bedroom house. So our goal is to focus in and help them schedule their time. Now, the schedule I've given you here on the right, it actually comes from the Neuropsychology and Education Services for Children and Adolescents. It starts the day off, as you can see here, at 9 a.m. and closes the day, after dinner, even, that fresh air. The academic time closes at 4. You'll notice how they broke the day up. It's in balance. There's balance between academic time in the morning and academic time in the afternoon. It's balanced with creative time and quiet time. But notice the small amount of time that's truly devoted to academics. Even the morning time here is no electronics. That's our offline learning. The afternoon, a little longer time period, is electronics are okay, or our online learning. So again, we're going to want to balance and help parents balance that learning from home. And as we think through what learning from home can look like, we really need to make sure that we have reasonable learning expectations. As you saw from the schedule that we saw a moment ago, elementary students, we're lucky if we're going to get about an hour to 2 hours a day focused on academics. And as our students progress in age, we'll get a little more time, but I do mean just a little. Our middle school kids are going to have maybe an hour and a half to 3 hours per day total. Now they have multiple teachers and cores and electives. Now our elementary students, they have a single teacher, a single touch point, a teacher that can take and focus in on the core. But our middle school and our high school students, they have those multiple teachers, and they're going to have to share a limited amount of time. Look at our high school students. Imagine they're only going to probably dedicate 2 to 4 hours a day in their learning. But if they have 6, 7, or 8 teachers, managing that caseload is going to be very difficult. And the more teachers that pile on the work, the more cognitive load, which is just going to give our students more reason to say, I've had enough, I can't do it, and stop. So it's going to be key for us to work with our peers and think about how do we balance the day. If we know that we're not going to get the same amount of time that we had before, how can we balance this limited time? Maybe math and science can say we're only going to give 2 solid lessons on this week, maybe Monday and Wednesday. And maybe English and social studies can focus in on Tuesday and Thursday. And let our electives pull in some really cool creative opportunities. But it's really going to become important that we work with our peers and our administrators on figuring out what that's going to be like. Because as you can see, online learning is going to take a lot more time. We're going to have to lower our expectations. So how do we balance all of this low amount of time? How do we balance lots of different teachers trying to help our students? So what is it going to entail? Well, balance in mind, we need to think about the balance between home life, work life, academic life. We need to think about balancing time with our fellow educators, balancing time with online and offline activities, and balance between new skills and new pedagogies, and that balance between relationships and learning. So again, coming back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, here we have a great balance. The balance between wanting to maintain those relationships with our students and knowing that we have content that the students need to learn. So let's start with relationships. The first thing we want to do is we want to capture the kids' hearts, right? You had a relationship with your students before they left to social distancing. We want to maintain that relationship. We want our students to see and hear their teachers. They want to see and hear their peers. Again, going back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that psychological safety, that feeling of belonging. We want to praise and praise often. Use humor, use stories. Make them want to come to class. Now, the learning side of this balance is we are missing a lot of content. When we left in mid-March, and who knows when we're going to come back, there is content that we had yet to discover. So we want to balance this new content with some practices, opportunities, an opportunity to discuss and assess using the academic language. So we want to balance that core business of schools, relationships, and learning, while keeping in mind Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So as we look at remote learning, there's another way to balance it. I like to think of it as sometimes the learning comes in learning extension. These are review activities, general practice, exercises that can be done at home. In the past, we usually called these summer packets. They were those things that students can work on. They weren't graded, but they were a great opportunity to try to reduce the lack of learning. I would like to say that we should focus in on continued learning. There was content that students have yet to obtain. There were benchmarks in Nevada academic standards that I and students are being held responsible for. So we'll want to think about how can we, in the remote learning situation, try to continue that learning, pushing forward new content, maintaining the benchmarks that were set for us. Now, I got to tell you that you don't have to do it alone. That's the nice thing about digital content, because we can partner with digital content to help in that route. So when we're thinking about balance, we also want to think about balancing the modality, right? If we're going to push for those continued learnings, right? Pushing forward to new content and benchmark standards, we'll want to balance offline and online. So if you have students that took their math, English, science, social study workbooks home, use them. Let them write on paper and pencil. Most of them have cell phones. They can take a picture of their work and send it to you. And also digital content on our technology. So again, we want to balance that modality as we push forward, because one of the things that we don't want to happen is we don't want to have a huge amount of learning loss. Now here's a map that I've taken from Education Week, and I've given you a bit.ly so that you can go in and see the article. And again, capitals are going to matter, so it's Ed Week -COVID map. And they've updated this map on a daily basis. Matter of fact, I pulled a graphic down 2 days ago, and in those 2 days, 4 additional states have added. Colorado, Massachusetts, Ohio, and West Virginia turned dark blue, which means they're closed for the academic year. And as you look at Nevada, there's only 5 light blue states: Nevada, Montana, Wyoming, South Carolina, and it's a little hard to see because she's so small, Rhode Island, that have only said that they're going to hold on until the end of April before they make some decisions. Those crash hash marks ones, those are people who have recommended closures. So we are truly, in the minority. And if you think about the time when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, it took them about 2 years to make up that loss. With remote learning, it should not take us 2 years to make up this loss. And that's why it's going to be so important for us to continue the learning. It's going to be so important for us to create lessons where students are introduced to new content so that we don't end up in a massive learning loss. So as we look at lesson planning with new skills and new pedagogy, we can't take that same old lesson planning mindset that we had before and just flip it to an online distance learning environment. It's not going to work. That's why it's going to be important for us to focus in on relationships and learning. So as we think of remote learning, we've got this great opportunity. They're called digital tools and digital content. Digital content is this stuff that we want to partner with. It is the curriculum that's at grade level or subject area that's packaged in single learning objects or lessons or sometimes even full course. Some of you probably already have it. You probably have some vendor content that you've been using, or maybe an open educational resource content like Khan Academy or CK12, where you're pulling these individual objects into your classroom. But hey, you don't have to start with digital. Did I remind you we want to go back to balancing modality? If you had a textbook in your classroom, do students have that physical textbook at home to reference? And if so, then let's use them. And I will bet you, even if they don't have it, I'll bet you there's an online version of that textbook. In the past, you may not have needed it, so you didn't have to look for it. Most publishers have online activities, online practices, and even online assessments that accompany their products. Now is the time to check. Also, you'll want to look at digital tools. Now, tools are used to create, organize, and manage classrooms. Some of you probably are using Google Classroom. That's a great tool. It comes empty. There's no math or science in there, but it's a great place to design and craft instruction. You may have heard of tools like Kahoots or Flipgrid or Padlet. Those are great digital tools as well. But I'm going to tell you, as you move to remote learning, reduce the cognitive load. The more places that kids have to go and the more digital tools that you use, you're going to just increase that cognitive load. So less is more. I like to say reduce this down to 1 or 2, maybe 3 quality partners that you can work with so that you're reducing the number of clicks, the number of places, the number of logins. All of those things are reduced so that we're not putting up those barriers when students are trying to learn. So again, find some digital content. And I'm telling you, if you haven't checked your textbooks, there's probably some there. There's some really good digital content out there. Some of you probably have software that you were using in your classroom previously. No reason to throw that away. Continue to use it in our remote learning situation. If you are using tools, use those as well. The cognitive load has already been reduced because if you were use all this stuff in your classroom before, the students already have some knowledge to hang from, right? But our key place is we need to start by establishing an online presence. And as you heard me say moments ago, go with what you know. Familiarity will provide comfort, and less is more. So if you already have a Google Classroom or you already have a teacher website, use them. If you've been using a full-blown learning management system like Canvas or Schoology, continue to use them. You and your students are already comfortable with those things. If you don't have any, talk to your administrator and find out what they would like you to use, so that across the board you can reduce the cognitive load of your student population. We want to continue the learning in this online presence. It's going to be essential. We need a place where we can distribute student learning tasks, share resources, gather feedback, and keep everyone in the loop. During these e-learning days, you'll need that environment where it's easy to come through and just grab what they need to learn and submit assignments. So think through that. I'm going to talk about a simplified lesson plan right here in just a moment, and you're going to love it because we want to keep a consistent template, a consistent place to go for looking for assignments, a consistent place for turning in assignments. As long as we have that consistency, we can reduce that cognitive load. And like I said, I'm a big fan of borrowing quality content, not building it, but borrowing it, right? People have already put together quality English, quality math, quality social studies materials that we can use in our classroom to engage students with. This is where it's going to help us to push those students into new content areas. Because as we move forward, it's going to be essential to look at those standards, right? Look at the standards that we haven't met in this latter half of the year. But keep in mind, reduce your expectations. Maintain a slower pace, because I'm going to tell you it's going to take twice as long to complete a task at home. If you thought it was going to take students maybe 20 minutes to do the exercises or the tasks that you've given them, it's probably going to take them 40, if not up to 60. Because remember, they've got distractions, they don't have bell schedules, and dang, they're thirsty. They want to go to the refrigerator and get something to drink. So cut your workload in half. And the way you can cut your workload in half is focusing in on the essential standards. We want to continue the learning. We want to bring in that new content. And partnering with a digital provider and helps us hit those task marks, right? Focus in on those benchmark calendar stuff that we missed. That's going to help us get to that workload at 1/2 at a slower pace. Because in your regular classroom, if you think about it, you were doing stations, or you might have done an oral discussion, or you might have lectured for a half an hour. Who knows? But we're going to take that down, right? We're going to really hone it in on those essential standards. So as we build lessons, I'm going to give you a simplified 4-step lesson plan. Looks probably very similar to what you were doing in your classroom before. Yeah, you're not going to have the I do, we do, you do. It's going to be hooking those students, right? Bringing them in, welcoming them to class, tell them what today's objectives are, even giving them a checklist. Okay, I need you to read here, I need you to do these exercises, and then take a quiz. But this is the area where we really want to build those relationships. I'm a big fan. Use this opportunity to record a video. Or if you have the opportunity to go live, go live. We want to hook those students into learning, and we do that via relationships, letting them know that we care about them. Then we'll want to introduce the new content. Now, there's a variety of ways of introducing new content. Lectures, one way. Again, you could record a video, or you could go live. You have textbooks that you could possibly pull from, or you have a digital partner where you can pull in. Find that balance, right? We want to also give students the opportunity to practice and digest the new learning. Now, this practicing and digesting should be non-graded. It should have multiple attempts with rapid feedback. That's what technology is really good about. And this might be a good opportunity to bring in discussions and using some of the academic language. The last step here is to assess. We want to check for understanding, right? You can grade it or not grade it. That's really up to you. But the key here is to have the data to inform instruction, so that we know who needs one-on-one support and maybe holding a little small tutoring session with that student via the phone or via a live webinar. It's also a great way for us to take attendance. So let's get a little deeper into this 4-step simplified lesson plan where we balance the learning. 1, start with you, opening the lesson, right? Personalize it. Give them that familiar face, that familiar voice. Grab the student's attention. Great time to throw in some humor, have some fun, put in some jokes. Great opportunity also to publicly praise. Calling out names of students who are doing well in the class, just happy to see their smiling faces. As they enter your live sessions, say, welcome, Belly, welcome, Betty, welcome, Susie, right? Remember, as you're making live or even recorded sessions, it doesn't have to be perfect. This is a great opportunity for us to add a checklist to today's lesson. Setting the objectives, letting them know where we're going, what kind of assignments are going to be expected, and when they're due. Now later you're going to hear me talk about due dates and not having really hard due dates, because oftentimes they're hard to meet. But you'll want to start with you. Your students miss you just as much as you miss them. So number 2, introducing new content. Now there's lots of ways to introduce new content. I like to call it the 3 T's. The teacher can introduce it using an audio or visual lecture or live session. Your textbook could introduce new content, but oftentimes there's a reading comprehension that can be tasking. And then technology can introduce new content. And we can find new content in all kinds of places in technology. Again, look for those resources that you've been using in the past, or maybe your grade level team has used or peers have used, so that we have this opportunity to balance the learning, right? The more engaging we can make it, the easier we can consume, then we reduce that cognitive load. That means that students will want to come back. When the cognitive load gets too high, the students, they bow out. So we'll want to keep it fun, engaging, very balanced. So think about how you're going to introduce new content. Now, step 3 is practice and digest. Just asking your students to consume content, like watching a video or reading an article, is only the first step in learning. Activities must be planned that allow students to engage with this new content. In a typical classroom, we often see this with worksheets, discussions, or even exercises from the book. Assignments that are generally not graded, more like participation points, really. Find ways to have students practice and fine-tune their skills with this new knowledge that they've gained. Right? Look for sites like Khan Academy or IXL, maybe Quizlet or Kahoot, where people have already put together some packages that have practice opportunities in. You'll want to find areas where you can have multiple attempts so that students can get immediate feedback. Technology is really good at that. So look for those types of things where you can try again, and that becomes really, really important. So check the resources that you already have. And again, I'm not a big fan of, grading when people are practicing and trying to digest. But that's let's look at where we should grade, because we should assess. Step 4. Again, I said practice before you assess. Now, the assessment doesn't have to be big. It could be a short 5 or 10 question quiz. It may even include some of those practice questions that you had the students do. If you had them do a practice sheet or maybe problems out of a book, just ask them, what answer did you get for problem number 3, number 6, maybe even number 9? Right? You'll want to think through, how do you going to get some data back so you know who understands the content? Ideally, you're going to want to look for something that's auto-graded. Google Forms is really great for that. Some of your software products have that already built in as well. Now, assessing doesn't have to always be a quiz. You can assess via pictures, right? If you ask the students to do a worksheet, they can take a picture on their phone and send you the worksheet. It could be a video file or an audio file, especially if you're one of those that are working in the electives. You probably want video or audio files. So again, the lesson planning that we've been talking about is 4 simple steps. Use yourself to hook your students and open the learning. Give the students a checklist or an agenda for that day or for that week. Add in new content. Think about the best way to deliver that. Give students the opportunity to practice and digest it, including using the academic vocabulary, and how you can check for understanding and get data back that helps you inform your instruction. So as we move forward, you want to think about what are the path to success. So again, all of us, parents, students, administrators, teachers, we're all learning new skills and pedagogies. So don't be afraid to fail and try again. If we're going to ask our students to fail and try again, we have to model that. So it's going to become important that we also ask our students, how's this working for you? So if it's not working for them, or it's too much or too little, then we can make adjustments to it. Maybe we found a software that we thought was going to be really cool, but it might be cumbersome for our students. So a path to success starts with uncomplicating things. Keep it simple. Use the 4-step simple lesson plan that we talked about here. Keep in mind that you have less time with your students. So you're going to need to really focus in on those essential standards. And you're going to want to have consistent placement on where your lessons can be found, where your assignments can be found, and where they need to be turned in. Instruction should be detailed and numbered. Step 1, Step 2, Step 3, Step 4. Maintain an open communication. I like to say start with a weekly agenda and end the week with a summary of the learning. So really those 2 contact points, if not more, with your students. Be flexible within routines, because we don't know what's going on in their home lives. And we don't know how many teachers are asking them to do what. That's why it's going to be so important to work with your administrator and your grade level teams to see who's carrying the large part of the cognitive load. And like I said earlier, ask for feedback and make adjustments as needed. So I have a simple 3-step plan for success. Focus in on the essential standards. Keep it simple, 4-step lesson plan, and make it personal with your face and your voice. Guide your students by helping them, like you saw that calendar earlier in the day, that can help them balance their lives. AM and PM times for studying, but they don't have to be a 6-hour block. Weekly agendas, it says these are the 2 or 3 lessons I need you to do this week. A weekly summary would be great. Make it personal, guys. Make those personal videos. Have one-on-one tutoring time with your students, and use the 4-step simplified lesson plan. But most of all, have fun. This is a great opportunity, right? For us to think about our own professional development. We are growing, and it's going to be an awesome time for us to just grow professionally. So take this time to think about where you can go with this, because next year, maybe we can partner with Digital Contents and continue with blended learning. So I want to thank you all for joining with me these last 30 minutes. It's been my pleasure to share. I know your professional growth is important to us, and today's presentation, it's going to be available on the Nevada Department of Education's YouTube channel. Come back to it anytime, and hey, please feel free to share the recording with your colleagues. Thank you again for joining us. It's been a pleasure to serving you. Have fun.